A single father thought the hardest part of his life was raising his little daughter alone after losing the love of his life. He had no idea that one dinner, arranged by a well-meaning friend, would force him to face the painful past he had buried for years. What began as an awkward blind date turned into the most unforgettable night of his life when the last person he ever expected calmly pulled out a chair and sat at their table. His boss wasn't there by accident, and within minutes, secrets that had been hidden behind expensive suits, office walls, and silent sacrifices threatened to change everything forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to so you never miss another inspiring story. Daniel Brooks was 38 years old, and every morning began the same way. Before sunrise he packed lunches, braided his 7-year-old daughter Lily's hair as best he could, burned toast at least twice a week, and rushed across town to make sure she reached school before he hurried into the headquarters of Lawson Technologies. Most people in the company only knew him as the dependable operations manager who never complained, stayed late, and quietly fixed everyone else's problems without asking for recognition. Very few people knew that every paycheck was carefully divided before it even reached his account. Rent came first. Lily's school expenses came second. Medical bills left over from his late wife's illness still followed him like a shadow. Whatever remained was stretched carefully until the next payday. Daniel had learned to survive without expecting life to become easier. His closest friend, Michael, had watched Daniel slowly disappear into routine. The man who once laughed loudly, loved camping trips, and dreamed about traveling had become someone who only lived for responsibilities. Michael admired his loyalty as a father, but he hated seeing his friend spend every evening alone after Lily had gone to sleep. For months he tried convincing Daniel to meet someone new, but Daniel always refused, insisting that nobody wanted the complicated life of a widowed father. Eventually Michael stopped asking. Instead, he simply made a reservation at a quiet downtown restaurant and told Daniel they were meeting to celebrate a promotion. Only after Daniel arrived did he realize Michael had disappeared, leaving behind a short message saying that life rarely knocked twice and that sometimes happiness arrived disguised as an uncomfortable surprise. Across the table sat Grace Morgan, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher whose warm smile immediately softened the awkward silence. She had also experienced loss after ending an engagement years earlier, choosing to devote herself to teaching children instead of chasing relationships. She wasn't searching for perfection. She simply hoped to meet someone honest. The first few minutes were painfully uncomfortable. Daniel kept apologizing for being tricked into the date, while Grace admitted she had been equally surprised. Yet as dinner progressed, the tension slowly disappeared. They laughed about terrible cooking attempts, difficult workdays, and embarrassing childhood stories. When Daniel spoke about Lily, Grace noticed how his tired eyes suddenly came alive. Every sentence carried the unmistakable love of a father who had sacrificed everything for his daughter. For the first time in years, Daniel forgot to check his phone every 5 minutes or think about tomorrow's deadlines. Then everything changed. A tall man wearing a tailored navy suit walked toward their table with slow, confident steps. Daniel recognized him instantly. Richard Lawson, the billionaire founder and CEO of Lawson Technologies, almost never appeared outside official company events. Yet there he was, looking directly at Daniel with an unreadable expression before politely asking if he could join them for a moment. Grace looked confused. Daniel looked terrified. Every employee feared unexpected attention from Richard Lawson. The man had built a multi-billion-dollar company through impossible standards and relentless discipline. Although respected, he remained distant from nearly everyone in the organization. Richard calmly took a seat, but instead of speaking about work, his eyes rested briefly on Grace before returning to Daniel. His expression softened in a way Daniel had never witnessed inside the office. He quietly admitted that he had recognized Daniel the moment he entered the restaurant. Richard had originally planned to avoid interrupting, but after watching Daniel smile for the first time in years, he realized there was something he could no longer keep hidden. Daniel's heart pounded. Years earlier, during one of the darkest nights of Daniel's life, when his wife Emma was fighting for every breath in the hospital, Daniel had desperately needed emergency leave. Company policy at the time required executive approval because of an important product launch. Daniel remembered submitting the request through several managers before receiving a cold rejection from human resources. Forced to choose between work and family, he resigned the next morning. 3 days later, Emma passed away. Months afterward, Richard Lawson personally contacted Daniel, offering him another position after learning about his exceptional reputation. Daniel accepted because he needed stability for Lily, never knowing what had truly happened behind the scenes. Now Richard revealed the truth. He had never seen Daniel's original request. An ambitious senior executive had intentionally blocked it, believing approving emergency leave would delay a critical project. That same executive had falsely informed Richard that Daniel voluntarily quit without explanation. The deception remained buried for years until an internal audit uncovered archived emails only weeks earlier. Richard's voice carried genuine regret. Although he hadn't personally made the decision, he admitted that the culture inside his company had allowed compassion to disappear beneath deadlines and profits. Daniel had paid the greatest price. Grace watched tears quietly fill Daniel's eyes as memories he had fought to suppress came rushing back. Richard explained that after discovering the truth, he launched a complete investigation. Several executives responsible for hiding employer requests had already been dismissed. New family emergency policies were immediately introduced across every department. Still, Richard knew policies could never return lost moments. He looked directly at Daniel and confessed that every success his company celebrated over those years had carried an invisible debt. The man sitting before him deserved more than an apology. Daniel remained silent for what felt like forever. He realized he had spent years blaming one company for taking precious time away from his wife without ever knowing the full story. The anger that had lived inside him slowly transformed into something unexpected. Not complete forgiveness, but understanding. Richard reached into his briefcase and handed Daniel a sealed envelope. Inside was not simply a financial bonus. It contained ownership shares in the company awarded personally by Richard, recognition for Daniel's years of extraordinary leadership, and funding for a charitable foundation in Emma's memory dedicated to supporting families facing medical emergencies. The foundation would provide paid emergency assistance so no parent would ever have to choose between work and loved ones again. Daniel could barely breathe. Grace gently reached across the table and placed her hand over his trembling one. It wasn't romantic in that moment. It was simply human kindness offered when words were no longer enough. The following months transformed more lives than Daniel ever imagined. The Emma Brooks Family Hope Foundation quickly began helping struggling parents across the city. Employees who once feared asking for time off now found support instead of punishment. Lawson Technologies gradually earned a reputation not only for innovation but also for compassion. Grace became a regular volunteer with the foundation. Lily immediately adored her because she treated every child with patience and genuine warmth. Weekend volunteer events slowly turned into family picnics, school performances, and quiet evenings filled with laughter that Daniel thought had disappeared from his life forever. Daniel eventually realized that Michael hadn't simply arranged a blind date. His friend had unknowingly opened the door to healing that had waited years to happen. Sometimes life doesn't repair itself through dramatic miracles. Sometimes healing begins with one dinner invitation, one honest apology, one unexpected act of courage, and one person willing to believe another deserves happiness again. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Dot because every act of support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Special request, before this story ends, please leave a comment with the words, "Everyone deserves a second chance." We'd love to know how many people around the world still believe compassion is stronger than judgment. Daniel often returned to the same restaurant each year, sitting at the very table where his past collided with his future. Every anniversary reminded him that the evening wasn't memorable because his boss had interrupted a blind date. It was unforgettable because honesty replaced silence, kindness replaced regret, and hope finally replaced grief. As Lily laughed beside Grace and the foundation continued changing countless lives, Daniel understood something his late wife had always believed. The greatest measure of success is never wealth or status. It is the number of broken hearts that become whole because someone chose compassion when it mattered most. And perhaps that is the kind of legacy every one of us should strive to leave behind.